Welcome everyone to the first ever Anywhere Operations podcast. Today we are talking Anywhere Operations in the context of hybrid working. Joining me today, I have two very special guests. I'll start with Dan Bowen, who is from Microsoft, account technology strategist, I believe is your title. Have I got that right?
Yeah.
Fantastic. It might be worth just sharing to listeners what your role is.
Yes, it's a very bizarre title, isn't it? It's about really looking at strategy for all the customers that I work with in Australia, and they're mainly enterprise customers, but just making sure that they are using all the technology that they've already purchased from Microsoft in the right way to get the most out of it.
That's right. Very important. And thanks so much for joining us. Really excited to have you here. We've got some really good topics that I'm particularly keen to hear your opinion on. And we have Michael Herbert, who's our General Manager of Operations, which I believe is a relatively new title, adjusted.
Slight twist on previous themes, but General Manager Operations, still carrying the responsibilities in Fasttrack for looking after our operational teams, making sure that we're delivering the outcomes for our customers, that the lights stay on, and that's kind of the gig.
Pretty important role, keeping the lights on.
It is, and something that's been, I can't believe I had a little look before the podcast how long I've been with Fasttrack. It's sneaking up to 5 years now.
It's flown by.
Yeah.
It's absolutely flown by. Well, it's great. It's been great to have you for this time, and this is your second podcast/webinar, I believe, as well.
It is, and looking forward to it. This is a pretty interesting topic. There's plenty of content for us to have a look through. Definitely interested to hear what Dan's got to say in some of his spaces, and keen to leverage his skill sets in this space.
Yeah, very good. Just to cover off some of the topics we're going to possibly cover if we've got time. So I want to get everyone's feelings about any learnings we got from after lockdown, any work practices we might have kept, and anything that we learn about the nature of work. I really want to deep dive into, there's a bit of a case study about how Fasttrack's actually personally, or how our team has changed the way we've worked, the way we've managed projects using M365. And I feel like we've got a really interesting story to tell, and I'm really keen to get your thoughts on that, Herbie. Also want to talk about well-being, which is a topic that I think in the Microsoft 365 stack, there's a lot in there that I've been playing with, and Dan in particular knows a lot about that really complement the new way of working. But
it opened my eyes up, Hayden. When I had a little look around, we had a chat beforehand. I knew there were some bits and pieces sneaking into the Microsoft vernacular and the way they operate, but peeled the lid back a little bit and peeled inside, and there's plenty of good content well-being-wise.
Yeah. All right. We'll get to that. I'm excited. That's the topic I'm most excited to talk about, to be honest. But we'll hold fire, and we'll start with. I might direct this question to you to start. Dan, so did you learn anything after coming out of lockdown? You know, we've spent a lot of time in fully remote working. A lot of organisations had remote working as part of their working style for a while, and certainly I know Microsoft has. But did we learn anything about how you work and how what methods of working work best for you off the back of spending many months in lockdown?
Yeah, well, thanks for that. You know, at the end of the day, I think we've all been working in a hybrid view in Microsoft for quite a while. You know, the mantra's been work is a thing you do or a place you go, which is great. But so I've been kind of used to it. But having the full onness of actually being fixed at home has been very kind of interesting, and the dynamics has changed across our teams and across the customers that we're working with quite a lot as well. So I think for me, I think what's come out of this is the fact that the productivity and the way we work in, it's all about connection and people. And people have found, as we always do in adversity, found really good ways to kind of connect, do things like, virtual wine tastings on a Friday night and things like that, to try to drive that productivity, but also to drive that connection with our friends and colleagues, because there's lots of people in our team. There's 7 of us that haven't even met face to face across Australia, because it's an Australia-wide team and a global team. So, I think the things that we've learned about is that we had to value that connection of people, because we've been doing hybrid work, but it's almost taken away a lot of that connection. So it's trying to put that back into the tools and technology, and through just generally as a person, and like we've talked as well previously, it's not just about the way that we've interacted it at work. Lots of colleagues, have struggled at home with kids, with dogs barking during meetings, with, stresses of relationships, and people struggling to be at home and working in same environments. It's very, very hard. So there's been, I suppose, tolerance and people are the 2 learnings that I think we've been able to take out of a lot of it.
I think that's a really good point. One of the things I've noticed is that, and I was doing some reading as well, is that the statistics to show that a lot more people have a better one-on-one relationships with their managers now. So, I think all my team members have met my dog, or actually my mother-in-law's dog, who we puppy sit. I think everyone has. Most people now have met my long-term partner on VC now, and had conversations like in the middle of the day. And I just don't think that was the norm. I think the norms have changed, and what's acceptable as part of the workday has changed for me, definitely. And I think that's been really, really valuable, because for me, there's been some negative things which we'll get to in a second, but the positive things are those connections that we've made, and the hybrid nature of work has really, I think, become the norm. What's been your experience, Herbie?
I was just reflecting when Dan was talking about interrupting dogs, and your pooch in the background tearing around the house, and shut up, dog. Yeah. No, you're right. It's far more. There's a greater deal of insight into individuals now. I know what your house looks like.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's been people that have been moving around their living rooms on different locations to keep some variety in the place. And there's partners walking in the background and all that kind of stuff that plays out.
Yeah. No, it's been good. And
the other thing, sorry to interrupt you, the thing just jumped in my mind as you're talking then was also, there's been a refocus on IT, right? So it's been really interesting. There's been the IT people that I mainly work with, the CIOs and partners like you guys do in Fasttrack, and really try to implement that technology. There's been a big focus on IT and getting things right. And those companies and organizations and schools that say we're using Teams, or insert any other platform in there, but using those well, manage to adapt really rapidly to hybrid work, because they already, for example, manage their devices via Intune, so that, if an employee was remote out in whoop in Australia, then you can send them a device and they can hydrate and do that. And the IT managers, some were scrabbling around trying to implement things really quickly. Some were bringing partners in, and you guys were probably working your bums off trying to get people up and running as quickly as they could in a secure way. But then some who kind of had already got their strategies in place were kind of, they were kind of loving it, because they were going, wow, I've been trying to get my teachers or my employees to adopt Teams, and I was kind of forcing them to do it, and it's going really well.
It plays to being, from an organisational perspective, being ready to adapt and agile enough to deal with something, and being somewhere near the leading edge of technology certainly set Fasttrack ahead of some of our competitors. And even in a school context, my daughter was at a school that was very well prepared for doing teaching by Zoom. They'd already done they'd done that, and so when they weren't in school, they were off and running and them working. So it really plays to being agile and ready and using the technology well.
Totally, and I've seen that too. Some of my friends who are teachers have kids enrolled in schools that weren't as prepared, and so they're trying to teach classes and help their kids with their own learning. And they actually really, you'd think a teacher would be kind of well prepared for a situation like that, but they're really inhibited a lot of the time by the technology and by the way that the school had set it up. Whereas, as you say, there's the opposite experience as well. And I think one of the things that we noticed was there was a really big gap in different organizations. So some of our organizations that had fully embraced M365, the learnings, they short-circuited the learnings to go to fully remote. And I think, some of the barriers that they faced were more around like laptop shortages or webcam shortages, and having that technology. And I think one of the barriers for those organizations were that everyone kind of experienced was being supporting the fully remote experience. And you might have the applications and the practices down, but if you don't have a good work from home setup, if your organization isn't investing in good screens for the home or good docking systems or whatever, or a good webcam, it can really detract from it. And I think that's probably where the gaps for me that I noticed was around having the correct home setup. And I think the value of that technology has gone up because people see, okay, a really good webcam at home makes a difference. A really good video conferencing system in the office to enable that hybrid work actually really makes a big difference, right?
I think one of the things I noticed with some of our customers organisationally were held back by where they were on their application journey. And so those that were still tied to client server type applications that needed you to be in the office to interact with your application were able to provide video conferencing, but they couldn't do their day-to-day work because they couldn't get to their system. They had to load this VPN and connect to it on their internet service and then fire up this Citrix application that allowed them to serve up the application, and then the performance was terrible. And so their application landscape held them back from being able to really embrace the technology.
So that kind of takes us nicely into kind of this hybrid model, right? So for us, this is an Anywhere Operations podcast, and Anywhere Operations is very much about having and we've covered this in previous podcasts. So go and watch our last podcast that explains what Anywhere Operations is. But essentially, it's about enabling customers, staff, and users to all have a really great experience wherever and anywhere they are. And so today we're very much talking about hybrid work. So that's very much focused on providing your users and your staff a really good experience when they're connecting to collaboration applications. What are the key things we should be thinking about when we're designing our workplaces for hybrid working, do we think? What are the things we've seen that provide the most impact? We've kind of touched on this a little bit.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think it's a mixture of a lot of things now. When I started thinking about this, a couple of months ago, generally, and we've tried to spin it. You talked about school there. We tried to spin hybrid learning quite a bit to kind of support staff into thinking how teaching might change. But when we look at the workplace, there's a couple of things, isn't it? Because you've got first of all, Microsoft, we move into North Sydney, and that was quite interesting because that's been in the process for years now, and it's happening next month. So there's all of the kind of normal things that you'd expect to be happening in a move, where you're talking about different zones and things like that and different rooms. Whereas I think, if we'd set all that up a year later, it might be different. So they've had to try to adapt around hybrid working. So it talks about I think when I'm looking at it now, I'm thinking about the environment we're at work, and the variety of spaces and places and communities that we can connect with. Because I think people, going back to my first point about people and connections, I think that's really important. So you're going to design human connection into buildings and into places and into rooms, and also have the facility to be able to, like we are doing today, virtually connect and physically connect simultaneously in that environment. Then the second part is also your online collaboration environment. So you've got your physical environment work, then your online environment and the way you're managing your teams and dashboards and tools and dynamics and whatever you might be doing, so that you can maintain and orchestrate your projects. And I know you guys have done some amazing work in that, and I can't wait to hear about that later. And then the third bit for me is about managing your home, where I am now, because what goes out to the window through COVID and working from home is ergonomics, health and safety. Lots of people just doing their work, on a kitchen table and whatnot, and then your health being detrimentally affected because you're sitting on any old chair, or even on the settee. It might be comfortable, but after 8 hours, it gets on your nerves. So I think there's those three aspects that I call out.
One of the things that stuck out to that is around creating that. I think we spoke about this in the pre-meeting, was around accessibility. And one of the things actually we were doing before lockdown and all that was we used to do a lot of in-person meetings, workshops and events. And we actually did them at Microsoft, and we did them at our own office, and we did them everywhere. And one of the things that we did was leverage Microsoft's 365, particularly PowerPoint, for accessibility, which sounds a bit, PowerPoint's a bit, you might think, it's a presentation platform. But we were using the audio capture, and so we turned on, we had a PowerPoint presentation to present, and so we just turned on, connected our microphone to PowerPoint, and got the live transcription happening. And being able to, just a simple thing like that, integrating that into your platform means that we're thinking beyond just how do we make our office more inclusive, or an event more inclusive. And I think that accessibility element is probably where we're moving towards with this hybrid working, right? It's inclusive to the people who are working remotely, the people who work in the office, and then people who might have needs that are slightly different to everyone else.
I agree. I think when we had a mantra with Xbox around that, which is when we all play, we all win. And I love your points. And the cognitive services got this parity now, where cognitive services like visual, artificial intelligence, and text-based artificial intelligence and facial recognition can really support you when you're doing those things like real-time captioning or even automatic translation, where if you're speaking to somebody and they want to listen to you in a different language, it's all built into the tools now.
For me, Fasttrack has gone through a pretty big transformation in the last, I would say, 12 months. Herbie, keen just to get your view on this.
I think for me, the way to best describe this is kind of looking at a couple of things. The first is the approach that we've taken.
Yep.
And then looking at the methodology we've used, and then have a look at some of the tool sets and processes that we've kind of leveraged. Yep. We wanted to make transformational change, continually improve and make Fasttrack better. And the way we were trying to make that happen and manifest it was by leveraging our operational teams. Everybody had goals, short-term objectives to get things done, but operations kept getting in the way. And so we were always coming up short, being disappointed with the progress we've made against particular initiatives. And so the approach had to change for us to get better success. So strategically, instead of relying on our operational teams, we took the initiative to say, no, we're going to fund this time around. We're going to stand up a team that is entirely focused on transformation. And so that was a big change, a game changer for us, was investing in that.
Yep.
And so there we had people that were entirely focused on transformation. The other change that we used was the methodology change. So moving away from your typical waterfall methodology for project management into a more agile approach. So having a two-week sprint, having very clear objectives to achieve in that particular time, implement those quickly, quick win, quick fail, quick redirection, stand up your new sprint. And that's been pretty successful for us to actually get some progress and land incremental improvement in services. So happy with that as the approach. Like, that's the outcome, is that I've now got something tangible that's working, it's customer facing, it's adding value in a 2-week cycle.
Yeah, so just fundamentally, without talking technology yet, there's a critical process change that needs to happen. Yeah, and then we kind of said, okay, how do we support this with the technology we have readily available? Do we need to invest in something? Can we use what we've already got? And we thought, okay, well, we're pretty heavily invested in Planner and Power BI and all that sort of stuff. What can we do? So how did we make it all work?
So the tool sets were fundamental for us, and it was fabulous having in our arsenal already our Microsoft suite of services. Yeah. We're already heavily invested in it. It works for us. We're already using Teams, And so it was bending teams to allow us to better operate and manage our projects. So pretty simple process, one team per project, and then standing up in that particular team a planner board for all of the tasks that were associated with that particular project. Project-related chat was in that particular channel. Project-related meetings were booked out of there. So one-stop shop for everything that was going on in there. Obviously the SharePoint library that lives behind that, so all of the collateral that was associated with that project could be stored somewhere. The cross-reference stuff, so here's my planner task, my deliverable is to create a scoping document, link that scoping document straight out of the task so you could work and work through that particular process. So that tool set enabled that practice nice and simply. Where it fell down for us was at the program level. So you can imagine if we've got 12 transformational projects going on at a program level, then at a steering committee perspective or a program level, we wanted visibility across that entire program. What tasks were on track, what tasks were late, what tasks were stuck. And so we needed some way, a vehicle to give us that visibility. And unfortunately, out of Teams, in its native way, didn't work particularly well, but we put a Microsoft Power BI layer over the top that allowed us to get that visibility in a single dashboard with the red light that says, here's the 3 stuck cards that as a steering committee we need to have a look at this week. How do we unstick these ones and make the action, keep the momentum going?
Yeah. And the cool thing was that we using the same, it didn't matter what the project was, whether it was kind of a more marketing and sales or more of an operations or more of an e-commerce or whatever the platform was, the task kind of type was, we used the same project management methodology so that we could roll up all of those insights into the same way, and we could use our senior leadership team or the program team could unblock those and keep the momentum and achieve what we wanted to achieve in those 2 week blocks. And it was really powerful to see how we had created a method of managing tasks to such a precise, small bite-sized chunk level, but within the same, with just Planner, which realistically is a fairly simple platform, be able to roll those up to a strategic planning level and have everyone on the same page in the same platform, and we didn't have to buy any other software, right? One of the things that you're focused on, Dan, is AI. Just wondering whether there's something from an AI perspective that we should be thinking about when we're pulling out these insights. Like we feel like we've done a pretty good job of maxing out the built-in capabilities of Power BI, Planner, and Teams. Is there something future-wise or right now that we should be thinking about leveraging AI?
You just explained like a fantastic way to use tools to manage like an agile project environment, using things you've already got, which is fantastic. And I think that's like a massive, tip my hat to you all there, because that's a great way to use it. And it's exactly what we do at Microsoft. I think before I answer the question directly, so it's kind of layered approach, and it's exactly what we do to get onto the data so that managers can look at what we are doing and what our pipelines are, our sales cycles are, and our projects that go in using Power BI as a lens on the back of our tools that we use in like Dynamics to monitor our kind of projects and sales stages, and then internally orchestrating that in Planner. So it's yours is a better approach than what we use in Microsoft. I'll tell you that right now. But you're using our tools in a far better way than we are. But I think there's a lot of tools out there, and that's where people struggle at. When you're talking about the AI part of it, you're absolutely right. It's about being able to predict. Once you've got the data, you've got those Power BI dashboards, it's about predicting what's coming next as well. So not only viewing what's happening with those projects, but it's about kind of bringing that data together and using machine learning to then extrapolate that and say, well, based on what we know in the past projects, we know that these things are flagged, going to come up in the next couple of weeks. And I think the the AI that's in there, which is my favorite part of the AI journey, I suppose, is the things we don't see. So the things that, you know, you're probably using now, you just take for granted, you know, the fact that when you're doing an email and you insert an attachment, it knows the last emails you're doing. When you click on an email or a meeting, bringing up the context of what files you might need around there, you know, things that are inside, you know, when you're doing a PowerPoint for your customers, that you've got your design ideas in there and you've got your accessibility features in there. It's the AI throughout everything, which we take for granted these days, you know, across multiple platforms, whether it's the Microsoft stack, you know, Spotify, Netflix, picking up our kind of suggestions and things. I think hopefully get into the position you're hitting AI at multiple points before you even get there. But when you're thinking about where you're looking for the future, then it would be looking at the community, I suppose, and bringing people together around that and looking at the insights around, you know, how people are working together in your project team, using AI like the My Analytics tools for people to analyze who they're working with, who they're connecting with, but then also predicting if you've got that data underlying there, which is gold, then not gold, and not even the new oil. Data's water these days, isn't it? So, you know, on top of that, putting that lens of machine learning and thinking about, well, what data is in there that we can predict. Some data is just a visualization, but capturing data that can be predicted around, say, sales, targets, whatever it may be, and then extrapolating that along. That's where AI sits in that data and AI space. But I'm interested in that fun stuff that we use day to day as well, you know, the kind of appears, like the noise cancelling in Teams meetings, you know, for example, where your dog barking in the back, if you turn it on, you're done, you're the dog, unless your dog's really loud. But so I think it's pervasive AI that's dotted around as well.
Yeah, I'm kind of contemplating the journey where we've gone in terms of what I'm seeing is, you know, our monthly reports were originally PowerPoint. We're bending them now to being Power BI, so you can actually drill in and have a look at the red to understand what's under the covers. Yeah, and I think the AI is the next layer over top of that in our journey from a Fasttrack perspective. Totally, yeah, being able to get those insights and predict the future. Yeah, I think that's. I'm looking forward to having that. Get the Power BI team on that.
Yeah, we could probably do a whole podcast on Power BI and how we're using it and how well we're doing.
I tell you what, that would be amazing, because so many people asking about Power BI, isn't there? As you know because I think data is a big trend, and I was quite surprised during hybrid work and things how much organizations are still transforming. You know, that my prediction, I suppose, just as somebody working in IT, was that people were going to gravitate towards Intune, mobile device management, security, and Teams, and then leave cloud for a bit, you know, the infrastructure stuff, because they're a bit busy. But there's been a lot of stuff in cloud and data and analytics, and a lot of interest around Power BI. So, you know, a Power BI episode isn't a bad idea. Yeah, all right, we'll book you in for 2 weeks. This is an interesting comment, because I think the AI piece for me that is pretty exciting is around well-being. And that's, I think, when we're talking about the stuff that we can get access to now, the things that you can turn on quickly and get value out of from an AI perspective, for me is well-being. And one of the trends that I'm noticing, certainly in my teams that I'm working with, the project teams and my direct reports, but also, you know, some of the research I've been doing for this podcast is that, you know, the people that are benefiting from this most are leaders, senior leaders, people who are managing teams, because they're getting more visibility on what their teams are working on, because they're having more meetings, they're having more one-on-one chats, and there's a bit more micromanagement happening. So what happens is, for me, definitely I'm feeling like I'm much more across now what my teams are working on than ever before, because it's all digitized. I don't need to talk to them to find out that information. I can just log in at any time. The people that I think are struggling the most are the people on the front line, or people who are the workhorses of the organization. And because the data backs this up, they're in 150% more meetings. They're sending way more emails. They're sending 50% the amount of more chats than they were before, and they're working on more documents.
And what we're seeing is using these platforms, people in some organisations, and I think it's true for Fasttrack, actually more productive now than they were before the lockdowns, because they've had to be more efficient in the way they work and more collaborative and deliberately collaborative rather than just kind of yelling across the partition. And the cost to that is that underneath this productivity is this burnout. There's underlying, the blurred lines between workday and when to finish, they're gone. And there's no commute to separate it. And people they might be eating into the time that they'd be commuting to keep working. And so the people who are suffering silently and hidden by these good productivity numbers that we're seeing are the people that are pushing themselves. And so this is where, for me, we've had these awesome conversations about and technologies that we've adopted to keep everyone working together and collaborating more and being more productive. But what's the cost of that? And just interested to hear your opinions on this. How do the teams that you're working with, what's your experience with how they'll cope over lockdowns and post lockdowns as well, and where the hybrid work environment has been kind of our hands have been a bit more forced than they were perhaps later?
I think as a people manager, what doesn't change in Fasttrack is that we have a steadfast duty on making sure that our team and our people are healthy and functioning, and their mental health is good. And that hasn't changed pre, post, after lockdown.
Yeah.
We have a responsibility for our people, and we will expect managers to be having a regular conversation with their people, not only about the tasks that they've been asked to do, but how they're actually doing, how they're actually feeling. Are they feeling overwhelmed? And making that a safe place to be, and having that relationship one-on-one with your staff to make sure that happens. So the tools may help. I've been doing able to do that with face-to-face is best. Teams are pretty good second. But that conversation needs to happen. Regardless of the tool sets that you're using to do that.
That's a good point. Dan, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, burnout's massive. I think we've done some research around this, and a lot of people are suffering burnout. People are working, but even before COVID, one of my main bugbears was people not using Outlook properly, people going in and, you start your day, you turn your laptop on straight into Outlook, and your entire day is driven by your email and your calendar. And lots of people have different habits. And I always used to do things like ask people when I was doing training and things, what they do, like have they got rules in their mailboxes? How do we get to inbox zero and all this kind of stuff? And since COVID, I think that's exacerbated. It's given us some flexibility where people picking up and dropping kids off feel guilty, will work later at night. I'm guilty of that, and it's a nightmare. So I think you're absolutely right. And one of the key things from Microsoft point of view, we put a lot of effort into that. So the tools that you can use now, for example, inside M365, one's called My Analytics, which it's empowering the employees. It's like Fitbit for your productivity. So My Analytics is a tool you'll find in your Office portal. If you go online to portal.office.com and log in, you can see how you're collaborating, what documents you've been working on, how many quiet days you've had. That means you haven't gone into anything, email, Word, you haven't been faffing in any of your work stuff. I had a shocking one when I looked a couple of days ago that I had one quiet day. So one day I hadn't checked my email in a month. It also tells you about habits during meetings, if people are multitasking, if you've got a meeting on and people are in their emails and mucking about. So there's lots of things like that in there, which empowers you as an employee. And there's also a thing which is new called Viva Insights, which I've been using a lot. And that's revolutionized my work in the last couple of weeks, which uses AI to go across my calendar for the following week, the week coming up, and puts focus time in. So it looks at my calendar and blocks time out, and then it also connects in with Teams, obviously. So it tells me that I'm focusing, and it becomes do not disturb, essentially, because people just keep booking appointments in using scheduling assistant. So it blocks that out. It also gives me a virtual commute. So there's breathing exercises you can do. And I was saying in the pre-catch up or in one of my podcasts what we did the other day, it came on my phone when I was driving to work, and it basically did a breathing exercise for me. So it was like breathe out, breathe, a little circle on the screen, and that was really good while I was driving. But then it told me to close my eyes and visualize my day, and I'm like, oh, I'm driving, I better not shut my eyes yet. Yeah. But that virtual commute and putting that in, and it jumps up on the screen as well at the end of the day to kind of pick that up, and also fixes your meetings for 25 minutes and 55 minutes rather than an hour and 30 and things. So, uses AI to really kind of help you to start your day, put focus time in and end the day, which is fantastic.
Did you do your homework, Herbie? Did you give it a
I did.
Give it a go? Yeah. What did you think?
It was a fun toy to play with, and it will be curious to see where it goes.
Yeah.
I think there would be a fabulous benefit to an organisation to get the metrics over the top to sort of gauge organisational health.
Yeah.
I think that would be a very interesting thing to see and track that over time and adjust your strategy and the behaviours that you run as an organisation, as a management team to.
On that, because obviously you've got to be quite careful that people, it's that balance, and there's lots of articles on it where we've kind of released things that we shouldn't have because we put system insights in, and then people were not using the tools because they thought they boss was watching them and knowing how productive they are. So we've anonymized that now, learned from that, because you're absolutely right, Herbie. If you can get that as a leader and that your staff are kind of working. And if you're a teacher, even, we got this embedded in for schools as well. If your kids are doing all their homework at 12 o'clock at night, that's not good for them, and they could be at risk. So it's a really good insight there.
So on that, because I did my homework as well, but I'm not aware of the full capability. Are you able to get that like top level anonymous data about mood, for example? Like, because I've been filling out my reflect my feelings. What's it called? Reflection history. And I was keen to know, I can see the trend that I've got going, and it's been actually really useful, but just wondering, is it possible to get at that data?
To see it at a company level? I think we
kept that for employee only, the reflection one, because there was a mental health, it's about you reflecting on it. So where possible, we've trying to keep lots of that data just personal to you, to help you as in your habit, rather than it feel like, your manager knowing how well you're feeling today. But lots of the data can be extrapolated from there using Graph API and things like that, but not from not anonymously. In that particular way.
Yeah, okay. That sounds like a good idea anyway. I think we want to slow release these things. For me, just personally, I've been playing with Food Insights as well. For me, the biggest value was the protect time as well. Being able to lock away that time so I don't get messages popping up and distracted. And also just building in those extra 5 minutes or 10 minutes between meetings. There's so many times where I will go from a meeting finish and then get a notification say, oh, you're late, you're running late for the next meeting. Yeah. And just having an extra 5 minutes to collect my thoughts and go to a meeting to be valuable has been immeasurably helpful. So
either to close out the last meeting by, these are the things that I need to do, having them into a planner board or something before you go into the next one, or having time to prepare for the next one.
How often do we use it?
And it does the wind down. There's a wind down activity, and it says in there, I suppose it's based on psychology research, but it says, are there any things before you shut off from your productivity, are there things you need to jot down for tomorrow? So you can type in, whatever it is, email, customer, do whatever, and then it reminds you in the morning.
Yeah.
How often do people complain about how useless that meeting was? So if you can build extra structure things into actually capturing outcomes, and then maybe if there were no outcomes, you can think, okay, maybe next time we don't have a meeting on that.
Yeah. Well, one thing we've just done, which might be interesting. I know it goes on to the final part today. I know we come up to the end, but the what we've done in the public sector team at Microsoft, we've created a thing called a 4-hour challenge to gain 4 hours back in a week. And the 4 things that we're supposed to do with that, and I'm going to try to remember them all now. One is meeting duration that we just mentioned. So standardized 25 minutes or 45-minute meetings. So we've got to do that to get our time back, to have at least 10 minutes each hour to breathe and have a cup of coffee or a drink of water. And then adopting better meeting etiquette. So I don't know how you guys feel, but I know we get lots of meetings in. And what we mean by that is that you've got to have agendas and meeting objectives, because sometimes you end up meeting. I had a meeting yesterday with a customer and we weren't clear about the objective. It's a recurring meeting, and then we were sitting there and there was 10 of us on the call and we were like, well, we should have got an objective for this. We worked it out in the end, but you don't want meetings for meeting's sake on everybody's part. So that was the adoption. Then it was committing to focus days, so blocking out the focus hours using Vivid Insights, or even focus days. And then creating time for learning. So putting space in. We lucky for have 1 day a month to learn.
Yeah, I feel like you've got some good.
Yeah, some good collateral there for some internal initiatives for health. It's good. Yeah. I like it.
I have to wrap up, unfortunately, but it's been a great conversation, gents. I really appreciate it. I think a really good way to end is we get everyone to provide their one thing that they recommend our listeners do to make their hybrid workplaces a better place to be. Might start with you, Dan.
I suppose I'd definitely adopt the AI tools inside the collaboration platform if you're using Microsoft tools. So the ones I mentioned, like Vivid Insights and My Analytics, just to start to get control of your own hybrid working environment and your own kind of collaboration.
So I'm going to recommend that especially if you've got a really busy day, I would suggest doing the breathing exercises on Viva Insights. So go into your Teams, click on the 3-dot menu, search for Insights. It should already pop up. Pin it to your sidebar in Teams. And then if you've got a busy day of meetings, before each meeting, go and do the breathing exercises. It takes a minute. And for me, it's really helped center me before a key meeting. I did it before this podcast. Found it really, really helpful. So that's mine. Have you got one, Toby?
Yeah, it's not tool-based though. I think if you're a manager, then ask your staff how they're doing. Yeah. And if you're a staff member, ask your boss how he's doing. Yeah.
That's a good one. I like that. Well, I think that's all we've got time for. Before we go, Dan, you have a really great podcast. Do you want to give it a plug?
Yeah, we got the AI education podcast. Lee, our Microsoft Chief Technology Officer, and I do. We release an episode on that every couple of weeks, and we talk to interesting people about AI and what they're doing, and really interesting stuff. So please have a listen to that if you want.